Heartbeating, an ancient drumbeat in his chest. Cries felt so deep, ancestors back. Whispers, cries, screams. Together they plead, I can't breathe. Unanswered, unheard, unseen. Lungs heavy with the weight of a shiny black boot. Eyes looking in eyes. Predator prey, a mind collapsed in on itself. Too broken by the true evil of this which remain in reality. Reverting back to childhood, seeking protection from the arms of the one who bore him. Mama, I can't breathe. Unanswered, unheard, unseen. A crowd of many, yet few did little. A battalion of cell phone cameras, zoom in, zoom out. Every kick on repeat, lives lost yet forever captured. Murder in HD, numbstack, we can't breathe. Unanswered, unheard, unseen. Breathing is hard, with a rope, boot on your neck. Even harder when the guy pulling, stepping, has already broken 4 ribs. Shouts, cries, whispers, a million voices, thousands of generations old, dying out like the last wisp of smoke from a candle burning on a cold December night. Trying desperately to hold on to the warmth just a while longer. A final plea on his tongue, thick as molasses in the winter, tapped from the shrub that was once a man, dripping with lime in a paper cut. Kind of pain, this face, unrecognizable as such. A mass of black over blue, over blue, over red, white and blue. One last whisper, extracted through bloody lips and missing teeth. A soldier being pulled from the desert, begging for a drop of water. Desperate, please, I can't breathe. Unanswered, unheard, unseen. Unseen. Unseen.
Good morning. This is Jack with one poem today, courtesy of Lee County, New Mexico Voices. Our host, Pete Malignick, has a new poem for you to have a look at. We're going to discuss it, and I think you'll find it an interesting analysis. Pete, would you please introduce our poetry today?
Thank you, Jack. The poem for today is I Can't Breathe by TaSonya Gray. Heart beating, an ancient drum beat in his chest, cries felt soul deep, ancestors back, whispers, cries, screams. Together they plead, I can't breathe. Unanswered, unheard, unseen. Lungs heavy with the weight of a shiny black boot. Eyes looking in eyes, predator, prey. A mind collapsed in on itself, too broken by the true evil of this world to remain in reality, reverting back to childhood, seeking protection from the arms of the one who bore him. Mama, I can't breathe. Unanswered, unheard, unseen. A crowd of many, yet few did little. A battalion of cell phone cameras, zoom in, zoom out, every kick on repeat. Lives lost yet forever captured. Murder in HD, hashtag I can't breathe, unanswered, unheard, unseen. Breathing is hard with a rope, boot on your neck. Even harder when the guy pulling, stepping, has already broken 4 ribs, shouts, cries, whispers, a million voices, thousands of generations old, dying out like the last wisp of smoke from a candle burning on a cold December night, trying desperately to hold on to the warmth just a while longer. A final plea on his tongue, thick as molasses in winter, tapped from this shrub that was once a man, dripping with wine in a paper-cut kind of pain. This face unrecognizable as such, a mass of black over blue, over blue, over red, white, and blue. One last whisper extracted through bloodied lips and missing teeth. A soldier being pulled from the desert, begging for a drop of water, desperate, please, I can't breathe, unanswered, unheard, unseen.
Okay. So, what do you want to say about this?
Something that I had not thought of earlier, that the punctuation is part of the emotional expression in this poem. And to give you an idea, one of the phrases that is repeated, of course, is I can't breathe, and then you have unanswered, unheard, unseen, and that occurs, if someone were looking at it on the page, it occurs in slightly different contexts, and the very last, it's the I can't breathe is preceded by desperate please, and then there's I, period, can't, period, breathe, and then there's no punctuation with the final line, unanswered, unheard, unseen, until the period. But that, to me, putting the period after the I and the can't and the breathe especially, is an expression of feeling. It's more, the phrase itself is a bit more demonstrative at the end when the author does that. So, yeah, hearing the poem is important, but seeing it on the page to get the full emotional import, I think is very beneficial as well. But a lot of different things going on in the poem. It was a big surprise to me when we encountered this poem and we thought about doing a podcast on it. I learned shortly after that the author had been a student of mine 11 years ago, and she was born and raised here where we are now in Hobbs, New Mexico, and now lives in West Texas. But it was a surprise for me to learn that, and it's a pleasure to have this poem. I don't really remember any of this person's writing from 11 years ago, but this is, to my mind, a pretty memorable and powerful poem. What about it? A political poem, a poem that stands up to brutality and injustice. Yes, and we've had those before, I think, in our canon of poems that we've been presenting.
Yes.
Certainly with Audre Lorde's Power, with Robbie Nestor's the Korean women in the factory.
Yes.
I might have that wrong, pardon me if I do, but if you go to that poem, you'd see what I mean. But here too something along the same line about an event that did not happen that long ago in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And although she doesn't say that in here, and she doesn't have to, I wrote down in my notes that this is a visceral narrative, visceral in that it gets under your skin. It's all in third person, even though there's an I that's very central to it, and we could reasonably take that I to be George Floyd. And I think one can always appreciate a poem by saying, what if you took one thing out of it? How would it be different? To give you an example here, how different the poem would be if it did not happen as the word rope. And real good, thanks. In capital, and it's spelled in capital letters too. It's not just, see, this is what I mean by seeing it visually on the page. And it's rope as a noun. We're not lassoing anything, but it's very conspicuous. It comes a little bit after HD, which I'm assuming stands for high definition, right? And the other thing too, so ask yourself, how would this poem be if the word rope were not in it? I think it would lose something, certainly it would. And this metaphor at the end, which clearly relates to the person being spoken about, who is, from recent history, George Floyd, a soldier being pulled from the desert begging for a drop of water. That's an unexpected shift there, an unexpected metaphor. Although, one could see, the idea of thirst. And what about this? The metaphorical resonance, a thirst for justice. Let's say there's the physical thirst, after you're being stomped on or physically assaulted, but then there's that on a metaphorical level, that thirst, I think, for justice, for intervention, unseen, unheard, unanswered, unseen, unanswered, unheard, unseen. By whom? By the people that were there with the cell phone cameras. The speaker, I think, invites that question. By the nation. What an interesting poem.
I think this is one of the poems that you can't ignore the historical time and place of where the author drew these words from. I think it's representative. I think this poem is very representative of the feeling of African Americans at that time when George Floyd was killed. This, I think very much so, that African Americans feel the unheard, unseen, and all that.
Where's the justice?
Yeah, where's the justice? And again,
why did this happen?
It's a repeated theme Uh, I think Jaden Smith was a kid who was walking through basically a white neighborhood, and he got shot. This self-appointed neighborhood watch guy followed him in his pickup truck, and if I remember the details, and I could be wrong here, but the kid was wearing a hoodie, and the guy basically drove up behind him and confronted him, and then Trayvon Martin might have been him. But I think there was another kid by the name of Jaden Smith who also got shot.
Who was jogging in
Yeah.
Georgia.
Yeah. And
A few years ago.
and again, it's a number of significant events over the past couple of decades that have not been treated appropriately. And again, police departments haven't been forthcoming in railing or pulling in their police forces. There's a culture in law enforcement that protects its own at all costs.
But in this particular case, I think could you say that justice was served?
I would say, honestly, that there was substantial stonewalling. That's why you had the riots. That's why you had people coming out into the streets.
Yeah.
Because, again, initially I think the police department tried to defend the officers. Even though there were 3 officers on the scene, no, none of them moved to stop the primary officer in charge from basically assaulting Mr. Floyd. And everyone, I think anyone who looks at this, who have seen the videos, have to question whether or not, that was a proper policed procedures. And again, this writer, seeing the same video, what is she expressing here is that I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I'm not known. I'm just an empty face to the rest of this world who sees me more as an animal than as a human being. And I think that's a valid characterization from the author's point of view, because she's expressing this highly emotional expression. And it's like it all goes back to what you said about justice. Where's the justice? Even though we have all the cell phones out, even though everything's recorded, where is the actual justice? And I think there's a lot of people who say that justice wasn't served, even though the officer was convicted, even though the officer is in prison.
And they all were, I believe.
Actually, I think 2 were acquitted. They were either acquitted or they were pled out to lesser charges. I forget. I'd have to go and look it up.
But yeah, for the poem itself, when you take a good look at it, when you reflect on it, little things add up. Toward the end, after a final plea for the shrub that was once a man, dripping with lime in a paper cut kind of pain, that sharp, stinging, tactile, that's what I mean by visceral image. Mm-hmm. And she's got so much of that going on in this poem, I think. It's really Well, the sum is more than the total of its parts, but the parts are, you can appreciate the whole thing by noting some of the parts.
Right. I do have a question about something here, and it's just it's a conjecture, if you will. We've done, Audre Lorde's poem was written back in the 70s, correct? If I remember right.
Yeah, probably.
So-
we can check.
So from the 70s to, and we're 26 years into the 21st century here, roughly about 50 years, maybe a little bit longer.
A half a century.
What do you expect people's reaction would be when they read this poem and say 50 years to 100 years? How do you think a new reader would approach this poem? Or no, what would a new reader experience when they read this poem? And and extrapolate that into 50 to 100 years in the future.
The sense of a racially motivated murder. Oh, that's what this poem is. Because ultimately, the poem is about that, I believe. And I think there's enough here to say that it was a racially motivated murder. I don't mind, That's how it seems to me. Power unchecked, power abused, brutality. People, not necessarily the bystanders with their cell phone cameras. Why did they have their cell phone cameras out? Because they felt that something bad was happening and they wanted to get evidence of it, let's say. But the passivity of the law enforcers, law officers who were there with the one with the foot on George Floyd's neck. What did they do to stop it? Nothing, obviously. So I think that 50 years from now, somebody reads it, hopefully they'll get that sense of that. And this is not a cheery poem, but on the upbeat side, it's a cry for justice. An answer to injustice, not staying passive to injustice and brutality, but fighting back. In this case, fighting back with words that can change people's lives.
I think that this particular poem is Miss Gray has written a very emotional poem, as you have stated, very visceral in its connotations. Again, I don't think you can describe those events with anything short of the visceral. I think a very emotionally charged time period, and this poem and this poetry is born out of that time period. And I think readers have to have a historical, cultural context to get a grip on it. I think readers who want to understand the time frame, they're going to, it's not something that you can take out of the world, so to speak. Some poetry you can read, and you don't need time and place. You don't need to know the background for it, if you will. It's just words on the page. I think with this particular poem, you sort of need to have an understanding of the context, of the time, the place, and the people involved, even though the names are not mentioned. And I think that that's one of the real underlying themes of this poem, is that no names are mentioned. It could be almost anybody who has a boot under their neck.
But you know, the racial aspect of it,
It's
a
clear.
mass of black over blue, over red, white, that's very effective.
But that's the descriptor of the black experience in America when dealing with law enforcement.
And she says here, cries, whispers, a million voices. She says, thousands of generations old, dying out. And that resonates with ancient at the beginning of the poem, in the first line, an ancient drum beat.
So, again, I think this is an excellent poem to study. An excellent poem to think about.
I think I totally agree, and I could, you could, well, hopefully we will be talking with the poet soon, off camera, whatever. But I just really like the way the lines are arranged on the page. I like the enjambments in it, where the thought continues on the next page. For example, after lungs heavy with the weight of a shiny black pooch, eyes looking in, and then you go to the next line, eyes. You know, that thought is carried over onto the next line. So what? It just slows things down a little bit. Eyes looking in. It makes you, the reader, look in.
It builds tension and it builds drama.
And then you got after, all by itself, eyes, predator, prey, right there. And that's part of that what I mean by viscera over here.
Yes.
Too. But everything is just really on target here for me.
So, final thoughts, Pete. What should our readers, our listeners get from this?
A poem that they would want to take a closer look at, because it's well written, and it's about, and part of its being well written has to do with the topic. You know, yeah, we could say it's a political poem, certainly, but let's just say it's a good poem, and we've talked about what it's about, I think, enough. So I would urge readers to take a look at it. And I think it makes a contribution to the canon of poetry that's being written in English today. This poem adds to that.
I would have to agree. Well, Pete, we're coming at the end of our time. Thank you for your analysis. Folks, have a look at Miss Gray's poem here. We do have an audio clip that is a rap. The poem set to rap that will be included, and we'll have that towards the end, I think.
Oh, I almost forgot about that. That was so nice that she took the, well, she cares about her stuff, and I might add too, TaSonya Gray is an artist, and she has a painting that kind of coincides with this this poem too, a painting of George Floyd.
All right,
And
cool.
she's got other really great artwork. She's on Facebook, and I think her what is it, the galley address is on there. Give TaSonya a little plug.
Right. Cool. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Have a great day.